Hey friends, and welcome to Sustainable Prepping, your home for fear-free emergency preparedness and a sustainable life. My name is Brecky. It is currently like 1:13 a.m. and I'm doing a quick vlog on my thoughts about preparing emergency preparedness since I got COVID. I have 3 thoughts that have been kind of jumbling around my mind. I wanted to get you a quick video out. My kids are sleeping because it's 1:14 now in the morning, and I wanted to give you some of my thoughts. First, if you're brand new, I want to say welcome. There's a lot of new folks who've just found me, and I just want to say welcome. I'm glad you found the slice of the internet. We're going to be talking about fear-free emergency preparedness. We're going to talk about sustainable living. We're going to be talking about that intersection between those two concepts. I'm not a low-waste guru. I don't do everything perfectly. Obviously, if you look at my shelves, there's packaged products there. I'm not an emergency preparedness nut job that has a bunker in her basement. Like, I'm a normal person who wants normal people to be prepared. And if that's you, I'm so glad that you're here. If you're here for emergency preparedness from a more progressive standpoint, I'm glad you found me. If you're brand new and you're just trying to figure it out, I'm glad you found me. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel so that you can not miss out, so you can be aware of all the stuff that I'm making. I'm clearly tired, otherwise this would be a more classy little intro, but yeah. And everybody who's stuck around, all the people who've been around since the beginning, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad to keep seeing you in the comments and over in the Facebook group. All right, so let me switch over my toast because my toaster's old and broken and I have to actually manually switch it over. So, woo, you can see my kitchen, and it only toasts one side right now. We're high class, but I'm not replacing my toaster before I move in like a month. So, and I've got that really lovely gravelly midnight voice. So nice. And no makeup. Zero makeup, friends. Zero makeup. I literally had my hair in a bun when I went to sleep. So here's the deal. I got COVID and I got sick. I got really sick. Not needing to be hospitalized. I was not in danger of that, though my husband had to go in to have his oxygen levels checked, his lung infection. That's secondary to COVID, which is part of the problem of COVID. Even though it's almost 2 weeks out, I still have some residual illness. I'm still got a lot of fatigue and brain fog, which is why making videos is hard. But I have a few minutes and a few thoughts. Now, one of the things I've been thinking about since I got COVID when it comes to emergency preparedness is that no matter how much you prep, you are going to forget something. You're not going to have something that you need. You cannot have everything. You cannot have it all. And there's this idea that if you hoard and store and have everything labeled in all the systems, you're somehow going to cheat the system, right? You are somehow going to have everything for every emergency. And that's not true. You are going to have things that are expired and aren't good anymore. You're going to be missing one critical piece that you would never have thought of because you were not in the situation before. Whether it's medical, whether it's energy production, home management, protection, whatever it is, communications, all the different areas, right? We talk about the different foundations of emergency preparedness. Enough water, enough food, enough medicine, enough cash, enough whatever, enough skills, you're going to be lacking because no one person and no one family can do everything. You can't. And so getting sick with COVID made me realize, okay, I have these gaps in my medical preparations, and they're things that I would never have thought about if I hadn't had this illness. For example, I have a ton of cold and flu medication. Plenty. In fact, we didn't have to buy any. The only stuff I bought was when I was literally driving home from visiting my grandmother in the hospice because I started feeling sick and I didn't have all of my stuff with me. It was an emergency trip. I was borrowing someone's car. It was this whole shenanigans, right? And I have plenty of cold and flu medication, daytime, nighttime. So something like a Mucinex or a NyQuil, Dayquil kind of thing. And one of the things I learned is that I don't actually need all of that all the time. One of the downsides to those all-in-one packages is that you constantly have to be taking acetaminophen, which is what we call Tylenol. Well, if you don't actually need it because you don't have a fever-reducing issue, like you're not bringing a fever down or you don't have pain, you're taking it unnecessarily and it can damage your liver. So what I needed was to separate out those individual ingredients and have a cough suppressant or have the guaifenesin, the cough decongestant that's going to help you the expectorant or whatever. I needed to have those individual ingredients, and I didn't have all of those individual ingredients all separated out. I had a couple, like I had a ton of guaifenesin, the expectorant, because I wanted to make sure I got all the mucus out of the lungs when I learned about COVID, but I didn't have, it starts with a D and I'll look it up and put it down here, but the cough suppressant, I didn't have that separated out. I only had the expectorant separated out. So if I wanted a cough suppressant, I had to also take everything else. That was a gap that I hadn't thought about, because I don't get colds often, knock on wood. I only get colds once or twice a year. I take the whole package. Oh, my toast is done on the other side. I take the whole package and it's fine, right? But I realized that it wasn't fine. I realized that I needed to have both the all-in-one and the separate ingredients. I couldn't have known that unless I'd gone through the emergency, right? I have 2 pulse oxes, couldn't find either of them, had to order one on the internet. I have 3 now, right? I have 3 pulse oxes. I have no idea why they're not in either of my 2 emergency kits. Somehow they were taken out and they weren't put back, because I have children and a spouse, right? Those things happen. Mistakes happen. Human error happens. You cannot prep and have every single thing perfect all the time. You can't. And so accepting that is a huge win mentally. It's something you need to do. You can't be perfect all the time. You just do your best with what you have. So that's the first thing that I kind of realized going through COVID. Okay, the second thing I learned, I'm buttering my toast, by the way. Toast is a little overdone, whatever. Second thing I realized that I would not have known, I don't think, or I wouldn't have really had clarity on if I hadn't gotten COVID, really is the importance of community. We had a situation where I needed to take my husband to the ER and we didn't want to have to pay for an ambulance. The hospital's like a mile from my house, but we needed someone to stay with the little girls, and we don't have any family here. We don't have any friends here. I was not testing COVID positive anymore, but my husband was, so the house was still kind of like quarantine zone. What were we gonna do? Pack the girls in the car? It was like 11 o'clock at night. It was this whole situation. Now, it wasn't life-threatening. We totally could have put the babies in the car. It was not one of those things where we were in dire straits, but it helped that I have a neighbor who was willing to mask up and come and just hang out with my daughters. They watched a show on the iPad and she read them some stories, so we could drive and drop my husband off at the ER and then a few hours later go and pick him up. And if I had not had that friend, actually that same friend made me this yummy cherry jam. Can you even see that? It's it's backwards, weird. Hello, it's the middle of the night, I'm tired. What I realized is that community is essential. You cannot do it alone. The lone wolf mentality is the dumbest thing I think I hear coming out of prepping, and it frustrates me so much. You and your family cannot do everything for yourselves. You cannot grow all the food that you will need forever and ever, amen. Because most of us, 99% of us, don't harvest our own salt, right? And you need salt to live. You are not an island. The more community you have, the more people you have in your corner, and the more people you're willing to show up for, the stronger you're going to be in an emergency. Because you can share the load. What you don't have, someone else might have. What skill you lack, someone else may have. And then you can help them, and it can become this mutual exchange. Is there risk? Of course there's risk. But I'm on the internet. Like, there's risk for me making videos. You have to choose your risk. Which is basically the third insight I have, so let's go sit down and eat toast. From bad lighting to worse lighting. Okay, so the third insight I had, let me have a sip of tea. So the third insight I had has to do with risk. What risks are you willing to take to live your life? I had this insight when we were coming back we went to Disney World. That's one of the places we could have picked it up, though I didn't get sick until over a week after we were there. So caveats aside, you have to decide what risks you're willing to take and what of your life you're willing to give up to be more or less safe. This was highlighted for me because I watched yesterday a video from another very large emergency preparedness channel with a huge platform who has really leaned heavy into the doom and gloom clickbait title stuff. And they had a conversation with someone who basically was like, you got to get out of cities. You got to get out of your population density. You need to move to a farm. You need to be totally off grid. You need to have all these capacities. But do you know how much of your life you have to give up to live that way? Now, some people really want to live off grid all the time. They really do want to live in really small communities, and they want to live rurally, and they really want to like truly homestead and go all in and spend their days raising all of their food and raising their animals and learning all these skills. And that's great. Like, if that's the lifestyle that warms your heart and gives you joy, go do it, man. That's fabulous. But lots of people don't want to live their entire lives isolated like that. A lot of people can't for disability reasons. A lot of people can't for mental and emotional health reasons. That kind of isolation would be very bad for them. We also can't run as a society if we're all homesteaders. Like, that doesn't work. We've had cities since humans have become agrarianists. We were able to domesticate grain and we built cities. Like, those things go hand in hand. We need urban environments and we need rural environments. Both are a part of the human creature. It's both a part of our human identity, is having places where people can gather, where people's entire jobs aren't just subsistence farming. Because let's also recognize, I'm gonna do a whole video on this, homesteading is subsistence farming. Like, that's the goal, is to get back to subsistence farming, which to me is a whole thing I don't think people realize. But that's an aside. That's an aside. The point is, how much of your life are you willing to risk? Conversely, how much of your life are you willing to give up to avoid risk? It's an important question. My husband and I gave up 2.5 years trying to keep our daughter safe from COVID. We didn't do anything. We didn't go out. We didn't have people over. Our daughters didn't go to preschool. So even though we both worked full-time jobs outside the home, we were juggling our hours so that there was always someone here with them. They've had 3 babysitters in their lives that weren't related to us. And they have come a total of less than maybe 10 times in their entire lives. They're going to be 3 in September. So we give up a lot of our lives, of our mental health, of our emotional health, of our physical health to try to stay safe. And I'm glad we did, because we were able to get vaxxed and boosted. And I cannot imagine going through this illness without any pre-existing antibodies in my system. I was over the worst of it in about 8 days. Still feeling kind of icky at 10 days, but like functional breathing. And then I'm now, well, I'm 2 weeks out and I still have a little bit, you can hear my voice isn't quite back to normal. 2 weeks out. Normally a cold for me lasts 3, maybe 4 days, 5 days of a little bit of recovery. But that's a long cold. Normally it's 3 days, man. And then on day 4, I feel better, and I may sound a little off, but I feel fine. 10 days, 10 days to 2 weeks. And I'm still not 100%, and my husband is still testing positive, and he has a lung infection. Like, this is not a joke. We sacrificed a lot to protect ourselves from COVID, and literally the first time we've taken any risks was this summer. One of those risks, for me, a worthwhile risk to visit my grandmother and say goodbye, resulted in me somehow contracting COVID. It's a lot to think about. Are you willing to leave your urban or suburban environment, or even the particular rural environment that you're in? Are you willing to give up certain lifestyle amenities, certain lifestyle comforts in order to live off-grid? I can't. Like, for a lot of people, living off-grid means like no health insurance and like totally being free and like using herbs. My husband has degenerative discs in his back. He would be unfunctional and probably dead without good medical care. So we need medical care in our house. Sorry, y'all, I really am going to eat my toast and drink my tea. The point is, you have to think about what your threshold for risk is. I did all of this in a video about minimalism and talking about risk threshold, but I think it's something we should talk about as people in the emergency preparedness community. I think this also applies for the sustainable living community, because you do have to give up certain lifestyle things in order to live more sustainably. Like, what does that mean? And what are you willing to give up? And blah, blah, blah. But for this video, I want to talk about emergency preparedness. What are you willing to give up? How much of your peace are you willing to give up? I've had to stop watching like a dozen YouTube channels, because all they talk about is how there's going to be a nuclear war and there's going to be martial law and the US government is going to fail and we're going to have a second civil war and we're going to do this. And you guys, those all things might be true, but how much are you willing to give up to be a little bit more prepared? Maybe you're willing to give up everything. Maybe you want to move to Idaho with all the preppers and live on a compound. Cool. That's great. That's a choice. But what if you don't? What if you want to be as prepared as you can while living as much as you can while you can? What if you survive the apocalypse, right? What if you survive the Second American Civil War or World War III, only to never have been able to see the world while it was available to you? Only to have lived in fear for so long that you burn out your adrenal glands, right? I mean, like, you have to make decisions. And some of my decisions have been stepping back from some of the really intense doom and gloom mantras and and clickbait and media that's out there. Am I glad we went? Yeah, because I don't think Disney World is going to be around in 20 years. I just don't think with climate change it's going to exist. It's either going to be underwater or it's going to be way too expensive to power. So I am glad we've seen it. I'm glad we went and did it. Will I do it again? No. Was it worth the risk? Well, since we weren't hospitalized, maybe. But you have to think about that. What's the risk worth? Is it worth it to live as much as you can while you can? Maybe. Maybe it is. That level is going to be dependent on your personal comfort and risk threshold and stuff. But for me, I want to live as much as I can, as comfortably as I can in regards to risk. I don't know what that's going to look like when we move. We are in the process of packing to move, those of you who don't know. And we're going to be moving in about 3 to 4 weeks. And it's a nightmare. There's just boxes all in that dark corner, but you can't see. We're going to be moving to a more urban environment, which makes me a little bit anxious, I'll be honest with you. I want to live. I want my kids to see art and hear live music. I want my kids to go to a grocery store. My daughters have been to a grocery store one time, and they're going to be 3 in September. I want my kids to go to a sporting event, enjoy the things that make life fun, because if they go away, I want to know that we enjoyed them. But I also want to be safe. I don't want to take unnecessary risk. I want to be mindful of crowd management. I want to be mindful of illnesses and active shooters, which is a whole thing, a different video I want to make, but that's one of the things I don't enjoy about going to a more urban environment because there's just more people. I want to live, but I also want to be safe. And what that line is, I think I'm still figuring out. All right, friends, so that's my middle of the night thoughts, my literal like 1:30 in the morning, middle of the night thoughts. I'm going to finish my toast, but comment down below and let me know, what do you think? What is worth the risk? Do you have community? Where are your gaps and how comfortable are you with your prep gaps? I hope this is a good conversation. I would love to hear what your thoughts are. I know that the lighting is kind of meh, the sound is kind of meh. I look kind of meh. It's fine. It's fine. We're all friends here, right? But I hope you guys are well. And I hope that you come and find me down on the Facebooks and the Instagram. I'm doing a lot more Instagram sort of story stuff and everything. I'm getting back into the swing. I'm getting more energy back. And hopefully I'm going to get into posting more regularly. I usually make 2 videos a week. My goal is to get back to that. And who knows, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom for a while. So maybe I'll post more. Maybe I won't. I'm not making any promises. Hope you guys are doing well. And until the next video, happy prepping.